Thank you for joining us for the Roundtable by Planet Underground, hosted in Las Vegas at CGA's Fall Summit. Special thanks to those joining us on the live stream. If you have any questions you would like to ask the panelists on the live stream, please submit them and we'll try to get them inserted here. Anyone in the audience who have questions, please walk up to the microphone. I'm Jimmy Wang with the Creative Partners. I'm going to have our panelists quickly introduce themselves, their company, and what they do. Starting with Bob, please.
Hi, my name is Bob Bryant. I work with Urbint. Urbint produces AI-based software that takes all of the 811 tickets coming in for our customers, and we risk rank them based on their likelihood to result in a damage. And then we pass that information over to our customers, who are then able to do certain things to mitigate the risks of those tickets.
I'm Tyler Byrd. I'm with Byrd Underground, and I am an excavator. I install wet and dry utilities. I work for developers. I work for government. I work for whoever pays their bills.
My name is Harold Lefler. I'm the current chapter president of NUCA Las Vegas. We are a national trade organization. Our chapter represents over 75 local contract members and associates, and making sure that our partnership with other utility developers goes smoothly.
Awesome. Harold, appreciate that. My name is Doug Kenyon. I'm with Stake Center Locating. We're one of the nation's largest damage prevention and technology firms.
All right, great. Thank you for everyone. The topic for this roundtable is damage prevention in the public. I'm going to kick it off with the question, and then you all feel free to discuss amongst yourselves, and we'll take it from there. So the question is, how do you think the damage prevention industry is doing from the public's perspective? And anyone, feel free to start.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, from the public's perspective, when a gas line is hit, right, the first people that show up is the news, typically, right? So the public always, from time to time, they tend to get maybe the bad news, right? And that's what a lot of time comes through the news channel. But I don't know if there's much of a push for the public to even know about damage prevention, other than 811 and their push.
I would agree with that. I think, just from my own life, right, and the people that I talk to in my own life, and how you meet somebody new at church or whatever social event you're at, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I work in the 811 world. And they're like, what's that? And I'm, call before you dig. What's that? And I'm like, the painted lines on the ground and the flags. And they're like, oh yeah, I've seen some of those, right? So I'm not sure that there's a tremendous amount of awareness until something gets hit, like you said, Tyler, right? Or, maybe at a more micro level, when your phone goes out or your power is interrupted or your gas is interrupted, then you become more aware about it, right? But I don't know that I don't hear of a lot of public pushback, whether we're doing a good job or a bad job, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We don't, as the public, here again, we're also the public because we are consumers ourselves. We don't really appreciate it until there's a problem or an incident that occurs. I think that the challenge that we face is educating the community to make sure that they understand what's involved with, heavy civil construction. We're in the roadways, we're creating mess, and all they see are the cones and barricades that are littering the highways. They don't understand that the infrastructure that's going in to be put into those holes and is what's feeding their houses. It's bringing water and sewage and gas and all that other stuff to their homes. So I think that there needs to be a greater emphasis on educating the general public on what goes on with not only 811, but the entire process of installing underground facilities.
That's right. Yeah, Harold and I would add one more thing, is that once upon a time there was a piece of paper that would be sent every month from your utility that said, this is how much you owe. Yeah. And in that, there would also be call before you dig, and like, who actually gets a bill now? So it's so rare now to have a piece of paper where everything is kind of electronically sent over and taken care of. You miss a little bit of that education that happened. But at the same point, if you go through the dirt report, there's a lot of information in there about basically backing up that a lot of folks don't know about damage prevention. They don't know that they need to call 811. They don't think that, oh, well, I'm only doing this, so therefore I don't need to do that.
Especially with homeowners and things like with the push that we've had here in Nevada here lately, there's been a real shift in, actually there was a change in the standard here recently where previously a homeowner didn't necessarily have to have a dig ticket because if you were using a hand shovel, you didn't have to call in a dig ticket. With the change in the law that just it happened here recently, now everybody has to. You know, a homeowner that's putting a tree in their front yard or whatever the case may be, need to have a dig ticket. Right now, they don't know that. And I think that there's a great opportunity to grow that through public information, through being able to get the word out there to, you know, we put 811 on shovels at Lowe's or on the plants that we buy from the Home Depots and things of that nature. That's great. But educating the community on what 811 is, I think is where we're coming up a little bit short.
Yeah, I was thinking about the upper Midwest, which is where I live. I live in South Dakota, and there does seem to be adequate advertisements. I mean, I see them anyway because I'm in the industry and have been for a long time. You know, I think the message there is call before you dig, but I'm not sure it gets much more granular than that. And to your point, and when it comes to a homeowner, you know, maybe when they think of dig, they think of Tyler and a track hoe out there. Oh, that's digging. You know, me putting a tree in my backyard isn't necessarily digging, right? Or
There's no utilities back there.
That's right. What could possibly go wrong?
Famous last words.
it's Wi-Fi,
Yeah, exactly.
wireless.
So is the public's relative unawareness of the 811 system and damage prevention in a kind of weird way a validation that the industry is doing a pretty good job? Because if the industry were not doing a good job of protecting the public via damage prevention, there would be more awareness like, okay, got to be careful. You know, Mary, who lives 2 doors down, her house just blew up last week, and Timmy, who lives 5 doors down, his house blew up 2 weeks ago. So isn't that kind of a weird validation that the industry is doing pretty good from a public's perspective?
You know, the not on the news is good news is a truism. You know, as long as your company name doesn't show up on the news, life's good. You know, and we have every time anybody mentions the word damage in our office, we have to knock on wood because as soon as you say the word, it's going to happen. We don't want, yes, to answer the question, we are doing an overall good job of keeping, how do I want to say this, of keeping the news away from the damages or things that happen. But I don't think we're doing a good enough job in educating them in a preemptive standard so that they understand the full aspect of what's required.
Yeah, I think in general, the customers that we work with and in the areas in which we work, overall, the damage prevention process works. And that there's a lot of information that's being shared with their customers on how to do it and what to do and when to do and why to do. One of the things that we see though is that I might move, I grew up in Florida and I've moved and I've been in different places. Every single place that I go to has different laws that govern what a ticket is, how long it's valid for, when, how big is it? There's all these different rules. So if you have folks, especially in the excavation community, that are moving among states, they may not know that they're supposed to do certain things. You mentioned I can dig here with a shovel, but I can't dig there with a shovel. So if I don't know that, I might do something that I'm not supposed to do. So the standardization of rules for just simple 811 calls, I think is going to go a long way towards helping this.
Bob, that would be very beneficial for, I think, everybody, right? Especially if you excavate in multiple states, and just the standardization, I think, would be very beneficial.
You know, but as an excavator, right, it's important to know the local area, right? When I go in to dig, in say Henderson versus Las Vegas or versus Clark County, right? There are different rules in each one of those. And it's my job as a professional excavator to know those rules before I go there. So that way, when I pull the permit, I'm pulling the right permit. I'm doing exactly what they want. I'm abiding by their standards. So as a professional excavator, before I enter into, say, what state are you from?
I'm from South Dakota.
So South Dakota, before I enter into South Dakota, I need to, make sure that I've educated myself on the 811 call before you dig law there, right? So that way I'm, I know here it's 28 days, but over there it might be 14 or whatever, on the dig ticket. And so it's important for me as a professional excavator to do that. Now, as a homeowner, that's a different story, right? You move from, say, Texas to here, right? Well, you got to have a dig ticket to dig with a shovel to plant that tree.
That's right.
Right? So it's, which is a good thing. So, I mean, it's a good thing. We don't want damages here in Nevada. So,
Yeah, I appreciate your self-accountability there. I mean, I really do. That's taking ownership of what your responsibility is and understanding law. I think that's applicable everywhere, right? Before you do anything, before I do anything, I need to understand what the rules of the road are, right? So,
and I think damage prevention, at the end of it, is we all have to take responsibility, right? It's a shared responsibility,
100%.
right? We hear the term shared responsibility, right? But it really is like, and if we actually take that responsibility seriously and we take ownership, like you said, then, damages will drive down. The 50 and 5 initiative will occur, right?
Absolutely.
And the public perspective of damage prevention will be high, right? Because, hey, we have professional people in our industry that do the right thing. They make sure they have an active dig ticket. They pothole, they expose, they protect, they dig with care. They make sure that everything is right. Positive responses and all those different things are all important. And we got professional locators that do their job. Make sure they check their maps, make sure they go down their checklist. We got great AI that does what it needs to do to make sure that the right people go to the right jobs. And we got great organizations that help promote our industry and bring us together as a community.
What Tyler just touched on there, I think that is a good opportunity to bring up the AI aspect of all of this and how that could benefit our industry. I think that there are, I'm old, so getting the human factor out of the field is difficult for me to understand, but I can understand the concept of having an AI system review dig tickets, checking for errors, checking for duplicate tickets, things of that nature, and then helping to maybe prioritize or maybe streamline the ticket handling process, especially when it comes to the locate side. Having come out of the I've made this statement more days in my life than I'd care to think of, but one of the hardest jobs I ever had was in line locating because I was never in control of my own day, because I wasn't in control of the number of tickets that were going to be called in that day or how many I had to respond to that day. That's the biggest struggle that a line locator faces. As a contractor on the other side of that, we struggle with, hey, I've got a deadline I have to meet. So is there a way to streamline that process using AI or using some form of interpretive data to help streamline that process so that both sides can be met? Now, do I think that we should clear tickets using AI? Absolutely not. Unless they can say absolutely certain and they're going to take ownership of it, that there's nothing in that area, I'm not a fan of that. But I think that there's opportunities to streamline it.
Yeah, and the beauty of AI is that it takes all of the information that's out there and essentially is a mechanism to weed out the noise and find the things that you need to focus on. So anytime that you can leverage technology in that manner, and to your point, there are certain aspects of it that you might not want to go down the path of, but if you can focus on those things that are of the utmost importance, and you can weed out the noise and find the few things that are the most important to go out and do, that's going to help the whole damage reduction process.
So I want to follow up on something Harold said. You mentioned the word deadlines, right? And we have two excavators on this panel, which is great. CGA's the newest dirt report showed that about 50% of all 811 calls / tickets were not completed on time. So the excavator cannot start on time. what costs your company or the companies you represent, Harold, more money over a year? The late tickets, the downtime, disruptions, failure to meet deadlines, or damages?
Oh, so there's a couple of aspects to this answer, and Tyler can clear it up for me. So, on-time performance is a difficult thing. So what's the determination of on-time performance or a late ticket? So if I'm saying a late ticket as an excavator, I'm saying 48 hours after I call in the ticket is when the ticket is due. If it's anything that goes past that time, in my opinion, is a late ticket. Now, there are agreements and line locate agreements and things like that that may give the excavator a little extra time, but that ticket is still technically late. So if the locate companies, and we've had some good luck here lately with making mutually agreed upon, and that's the key to that, is having a mutually agreed upon agreement. You know, because before it was, oh, you said I could do this. I talked to Johnny and Johnny said I can take 3 days. Well, Johnny doesn't work for us. Who did you talk to? You know, so there has to be a tracking mechanism for that. So being able to schedule work as contractors, we've got deadlines that we have to meet with our contract, who owns our contracts, whether it's the city, whether it's a housing development or whatever. They've got deadlines that they have to meet that we're held to. So that's a real problem for us. The other side of this coin is, what does it cost us on the back end when there's a damage or a line break or a mislocate or a unmarked facility? That cost is, in my mind, exponentially higher than the late ticket.
I'm going to agree with Harold there. So with a utility that is damaged, that always costs us more money. And I'll tell you why. One, I'm speaking for my company personally. I can't speak for all excavators, right? Because we all have different business models, but I try to take a proactive approach and, put in the human element here. And so, if a ticket is a day late or whatever, usually we can absorb that, right? But where the rub comes is when I'm in the middle of a job and I'm a good contractor, right? I call in my dig ticket within a reasonable time period where I know I can only get this done within 14 days, right? I'm going to call that portion of, even though I got a 3-mile pipeline, I'm going to call in maybe only, a quarter mile of that, right? Because obviously within 3 weeks, I can't get more than that done, right? So, or at least I shouldn't, because it's going to be tough, right? But the thing is when I'm calling in that next segment, right? Because I'm ready, or my guys are really kicking butt, right? And they're moving along, and now I'm having to wait. Or the other thing that is troubling is a trouble ticket, right? We get a trouble ticket right in the middle, right? And we can't continue to work, or we have an unlocatable facility, or there's just, we're looking for facilities that have been marked that just can't find, right? Those are huge costs, where we're just out there in the middle of an intersection working, trying to find a facility and it's not there. But the damage will always be the biggest cost, right? Because you can't put a cost on human life, right? If somebody dies, you can't put a cost on that, number one. I mean, our people are the most important thing that we have, right? But besides that, we don't know when we take that utility out, who's going to be affected up and downstream. Mm-hmm. And, not to mention, just when a utility strike happens, everything is shut down, right? So you can just count that whole day as a loss. That's right. So not to mention the costs that you incur for the repair, or the fines that you will incur, from, civil penalties, depending on your state and what you deal with. But I would say that the utility strike is the most expensive, cost. But, on-time performance it's really important. And that customer service element of the locator, right? Making sure that communication is happening is key, right? We want the locators to be successful too, right? If you guys aren't turning your tickets out in a reasonable time, and and you guys can't make money, that's not good for us either, right? So there's a mutual beneficial relationship there.
Yeah, it's on-time performance is actually a very complex issue. Yeah. And I think the root cause is systemic. I think it's a force to load issue is one example. And what I mean by that is, we have, pick a town, any town, right? And we know the historical ticket volume, right? And we'll plan for year over year growth, right? We'll plan for known projects. And then we go source, hire, and train our workforce for that upcoming big season. And we have a somewhat static workforce. Would you agree? You can't run to Walmart and buy a trained locate technician. And they have that workforce has a maximum capacity. And we've done everything we can in the budgeting process to plan properly for what we think is coming. So you have a pretty static workforce, right? We have a completely variable workload with no controls whatsoever. And an analogy that I like to use, whether it's appropriate or not appropriate, is, I just flew in here, landed an hour ago, right, on an airplane. Let's say it's a 150 passenger airplane. It's like allowing 400 people on the plane and then blaming the pilot that the plane crashed over and over and over again. And so I think it's not only a force to load issue, but it's also a ticket mix issue, right? So we get tickets depending on what state you're in. And we have some companies that will go in and, the admin will go in and hit refresh on 500 tickets on Monday morning.
Yeah.
And that floods the system, right? Or, like, I love the way you describe being a responsible excavator and really calling in only what you can do in a week or a day, and working with the locating firms. Man, in a perfect world, that sounds great. And I think our experience is vastly different than that, right? We'll get repeat tickets and update tickets on stuff that's been done. And there's a force to load issue. There's a noise issue in the system. There's, depending on what state you're in, there's length of ticket issue. And in most states, the shot clock's 48 hours. And so you've got a static workforce with all this coming in, right? And not meant to sound excusey at all, right? Like, that's not the point that we're trying to make. I think that there are some systemic issues that it seems like there's some low-hanging fruit that could help address. And in order to meet this 50 and 5, which I think is absolutely doable, I do believe we have to start there, right?
So let me jump in. Doug, you mentioned force to load a few times, totally variable demand. And Harold said he doesn't want to use AI to screen out tickets. Isn't that a little contradictory? What I mean is, if you have a huge spike in volume, and the tickets in that area are now 10 days late on average, right? Why not? And some tickets are going to be neglected. Fact, right? It's going to be neglected. Why not say, okay, instead of neglecting kind of across the board spread via peanut butter, right? We're going to pick the least risky, the least consequential tickets and throw AI at it, so that the more consequential tickets can be addressed adequately. I mean, why not?
So my thought on that is kind of twofold. First of all, taking Nevada, for example, Nevada is basically two major metropolitan areas with a lot of empty space in between. So could AI be used in those, what we call them cow counties here, where there's a lot more cows than there are people? Yes, it could. My question then is, when a ticket is sorted by AI and determined not needed to be located, and there is a damage of some kind, who's responsible for it? Under the current law here, the contractor is. Okay, so here again, I don't want to get into the liability avoidance side of it. This is a damage prevention. And that's what concerns me when we talk about using AI to screen tickets. Is there the future for it? Probably. The problem we have here in Nevada and specifically here in Las Vegas, the existing infrastructure is so antiquated and unmapped. Nobody knows what's in the ground. I was working in an intersection where we opened up a 10 by 10 hole in the ground, and there were 8 different utility or lines, conduits in that hole, and they were all crisscrossing each other and going in different directions. So we had to stop work, and it took us 2 days, to get that clarified, and nobody claimed half of those pipes.
Right.
Who's going to take responsibility because of the things that the AI system can identify because nobody knows that it's there?
Yeah, I think in general, again, when you're talking about AI, it is very good in the ability to figure things out that might be very complex for the human mind. And as an example, if you have water or gas or sewer, those are 100% buried 100% of the time. You do not have overhead water and sewer lines or gas lines. But electric telecommunications, you do. And there are times where that information with asset data, with other types of information can be aggregated together, and the aggregate of that data is much greater than the individual components where they come from. And you can glean information from there that suggests that there isn't going to be a conflict in certain cases. The example you gave where you have multiple lines coming through, some of those might have been abandoned, some of them might have been active, and they just didn't locate them. So those are going to be areas where I think AI is not necessarily going to be of any value, because there are going to be underground lines in these areas. And if that's the case, you can't go in there with a screening or suppression type of program. Whereas in others, you absolutely can. And I think it's part of the solution. And again, you talked about the responsibility of calling in for what you can do in a legitimate time frame, and talked about the legitimate number of people that can support that. If you have responsible parties doing responsible things with technology that allows the responsible actions, I think it can work. Just we got to get there.
AI can be used in a lot of different ways too, other than just screening tickets, ticket risk assessment. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a more critical line that's out there, regardless of whether it's communications or gas or power, right? We can use that to send that to a more tenured technician, right? There's lots of different things that we can use AI for that can help us achieve the goal of 50 and 50.
And one of
the
things to add on that is that when you're talking about that type of risk assessment that you have, we have customers that roughly about 3/4 of every damage they have happens within 15 to 20% of their ticket volume. So when you look at the categorization of all of their tickets, you go from the probably going to happen all the way down to it's very unlikely to happen. So I, as a locator, if I'm going to go out and I have to make a choice, I can only get to one of them's going to be late. If I have to make a choice, I'd rather go and take care of the one that's more likely to cause damage, more likely to have some kind of impact on the public.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if you're going to go to one, you want to go to the one with the high consequence, right? You want to go with the one that has the PVC gas line, right? The one that can just blow up, or the one that is a high pressure facility or whatever. You mentioned noise, which obviously that noise goes both ways.
Sure.
Right. We have contractors or excavators that call in a ticket and they keep clicking that ticket, right? Over and over and over again. And Lucy in the office, she doesn't know. She just was told to, make sure the tickets are active and call it back in. Meanwhile, the whole development is done. Right. And she just keeps clicking, and meanwhile, what that does is it bogs down the system. You're over there locating this when really you should be locating that high consequence facility over there on Water Street for me.
100%.
And you're not doing that, right? Because Lucy's been told to keep clicking this button, right? But the noise goes my way because
100%, yes.
we get 1,000 emails that we don't need to see, process, and deal with, right? And so it's like, maybe AI can eliminate some of that noise, which would be beneficial for not only the locator, the utility owner operator, but also the contractor, right? Because
That's right.
The noise is really, it prevents us from focusing on what really matters, which is driving down the damages, right? And that's what we're here to do, talk about damage prevention, driving down damages, and what that means to the public, right?
Well said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very well said. It is a mutual, look, nobody at this table and nobody that's in the industry wakes up in the morning and goes, I'm going to go out there and cause a damage. That's my goal today, right? Nobody does that. there's no locator that wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go out and be late on a bunch of tickets. That's my goal, right? It just doesn't happen that way. I mean, we all work together, but there is a tremendous amount of systemic noise that I think at some point, because I've been on several roundtables and we've talked about this multiple times, at some point, I think the question for me is who? Like, who does what? Like, what's the next step in that systemic issue, right? Is it, I mean, we could whiteboard some of these ideas, but is it ticket limitations, right? Use a restaurant analogy, I guess. When the restaurant's full, the restaurant's full. You know, you're not getting in until a seat opens. So, you know, I don't know what all the answers are, certainly, but I think that it's an issue that we have to address sooner rather than later. Because some of the things that we're talking about are all workarounds on how to handle the systemic issue.
One of the things that one of the challenges we had here recently with another change in our 811 procedures is length of tickets that we call in. You know, you can't call in a mile or 2 miles worth of ticket or on a single ticket. We have to shorten it up. But what it did in our system, and we noticed it immediately, was, yeah, they were still calling in that mile and a half ticket, but they were calling 6 tickets in to cover that same distance on the same day.
That's right. Yeah. No.
So they're, again, bogging down the system. You know, the company that I actually work for, you know, we've gone to the process where we don't renew tickets. We call in a new ticket every time. That forces us to take a look at the work that's being done at that time, on that day, and ask the question, do we need to continue this ticket at its full scope, or can we reduce the scope? Or do we need to extend the scope? You know, it forces us as a company to take a stronger look at our own procedures to make sure that we're within our, making sure that we're not being part of the problem. We don't, listen, if you're not part of the solution, you are the problem.
Right. Some of the AI that maybe Jimmy was talking about, like, I love that idea. Length of ticket is definitely an issue. I mean, there are states out there where you can call in an entire county on one ticket and it's got a 48-hour shot clock on it, right? Like, what are you going to do with that? But some of the AI stuff that maybe Jimmy was mentioning is if a ticket for 123 Main Street has been called in 46 times, and it's May.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like maybe have some accountability and get a hold of the excavator and say, okay, you know, this is the 46th one we've gotten this year, right? For the stop sign. Like, is the stop sign in? Are we done? Or, you know, I'm not sure. I think there's probably lots of different little helps that impact the overall systemic issue.
And on the other side of that is the tickets that are being called in that are not being worked at all. You know, just renewing a ticket and no work is transpiring on them whatsoever. You know, we do have that problem. It's just, you know, a systemic problem here in Nevada. So I think that that's another place where AI could be definitely of value to us.
You know, as an excavator, I'm going to be the first to tell you that we're not perfect. And, you know, we make a lot of mistakes, just like everybody else does. But I can tell you what we're doing in the state of Nevada, which has helped us with damage prevention, which we've had a substantial decrease in damages, is we've done a lot better with training, right? We've talked about ticket scope, right? That's important, right? Only calling in what you need, right? And also, you know, making sure that the contractor knows exactly not only what they're doing, but that the person that's calling in the ticket understands what the result is and what the unintended consequences are when they do certain things, right? So that training goes a long way. Communication has been key here. You know, different things that we've been doing here locally when we do have trouble tickets, right? What we've done is we actually have a TR in the system right now where I don't know if it's where it's gone, but you know, with a trouble locate, what we've done is we put pink paint around that area, right? Which allow that contractor to continue to be efficient, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so there's different things, but that all comes with communication, ideas, contractors, locators, technology companies, professional organizations all coming together to, you know, in the name of damage prevention, to drive damages down for the public, for our community, for our industry.
I love
so,
That's key.
yeah.
I think, you know, what you said, you know, rarely does a damage, we're people dealing with people, like you make errors, we make errors, right? We have people out in the field that are doing work. Their human error is always going to be there. And rarely does a damage occur due to a piece of faulty equipment or something. it's almost always a breakdown in communication somehow. If you think of an 811 ticket, it's an entire communication process where an excavator, whether it's a homeowner or a professional, communicates to a one-call center what they intend on doing, which then a human being or machine, interprets that communication, puts it on a piece of paper or electronically on a ticket. Back in the day, piece of paper, not so much anymore, right? And communicates that out to the utility or to the locating firm, which then interprets that communication. Then they have maps that they have to interpret, right? And then we put paint on the ground and flags to try and communicate back to the excavator where stuff's at. It's almost always a breakdown in communication. Rarely is it, oh, this equipment was off or it wasn't calibrated correctly. It's almost always a breakdown in communication.
100%.
Okay, we have a question from an audience member. Can you state your name, company position, please?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. James Wingate from USA North 811. I know two of you very well, and a couple of you I know semi-well, and one I'm not sure if I met yet. But one of the comments from the very beginning of the discussion, I wanted to push back on that a little bit. One of the comments was about standardizing ticket rules between the states. And I see the benefit to that from a perspective of you're trying to build risk assessment software that can apply across a nation, or you're trying to move technicians from one state to another and help with things like that if you're a contract locator or a large excavator. However, we're here at the CGA conference or CGA Fall Summit in Las Vegas, and the DIRT report was just released, and Nevada is one of the best states in the nation in terms of damages. And in my opinion, one of the reasons for that is because of the local culture and the involvement in the damage prevention community by multiple stakeholder groups, NRCGA and NUCA primarily, but also the willingness to have them be at the table and talk through issues before the damages happen and say, hey, we're seeing this problem, we're seeing that problem. And I worry that if we push to standardize things too much nationally, then that encourages the big companies to not be involved at the local level, which I think is crucial to the success of damage prevention. So I wonder, can we find a middle ground somewhere? Maybe the middle ground is just on the ticket output, where the one-call centers to get together and say, here's what we're going to deliver on the outbound side, or at least we can map our fields in a certain way so you can build risk and teach technicians. But I'm hesitant to say that standardizing ticket rules and ticket size and the date of ticket and all that is a good thing, because I think each state has its own culture and damage prevention that works for them based on what they've seen, and climate and all types of things come into, not just political climate, I mean physical, like weather, climate, all those things are different in different regions. So anyway, it's a long question. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Building a one-size-fits-all usually never works, never fits anybody.
Right.
And especially when it's, not to get political, but when it's governed by a central body, it's more difficult to facilitate change. What James talked about a minute ago, here in Nevada and here in Clark County especially, we've actually begun a damage prevention coalition, which includes stakes, NUCA, NRCGA, the Public Utilities Commission, the utility owners and operators, the locate companies, where we all come together at least quarterly and sit down and discuss the challenges that we're facing as individual groups and work together to resolve those issues. The recent changes that have happened in Nevada's laws are due to those committees and those groups working together to facilitate change that has driven down our damage ratio tremendously. So I think that the one size fits all doesn't fit anybody. I think that there are scopes that could be governed, as James talks about. I'm not a big fan of, limiting ticket number, quantity per day. I know that there are those that are, but there are things that can be regulated that can be nationally standardized. But I think this, here again in Vegas, we don't have to deal with rain. You guys have to deal with rain. You know, we have 360 days of work, you know, and the other 5 days are holidays. So, you know, so it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, we have sunshine all the time. But there again, the soil type that we have to deal with is a lot different than the soil types you have to deal with. So there are different, so the one size fits all doesn't fit all.
And to clarify, I think really what I was referring to earlier is, and Doug, you had mentioned it, in Nevada, it sounds like you can call up to 1,000 feet. Some states, you can call the state on a ticket. And I have, like you said, the shot clock starts at 48 hours. And in that same state, which is, I believe, the one you're talking about, a ticket doesn't expire. So you can have, as long as the markings are out there or maintained, which I think is a danger, as long as those markings are maintained, they can dig for as long as they want to dig. There should be some standardization on the length of a ticket. There should be some standardization on what can be called in. I don't think there should be a limit on how many tickets I should call in. There should be a process that your company follows, that I'm not going to call in a ticket that I know the work has been completed. I'm going to go out and call the things that are necessary. But I think there's some standardization out there that would allow locating contractors and excavators that do move freely, and technology companies. I have 40 some odd states that I receive tickets in, which have probably 45 different formats. So it's, from our perspective, it makes it more difficult, and having some standardization in there is going to simplify the process. And in no way should it ever take the place. You mentioned the things that you're doing for your county, your city, different cities. Those can't go away. That is a necessary component. And the partnerships that you have and the communication that you have and among the stakeholders that are in that grouping, you have to have that. And if you don't, it's going to break down. And you can standardize all day long. And if you don't have that communication, it will break down.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm thinking of two words right now, balance and communication out of what James said. There's got to be a balance in any kind of standardization. You totally agree with you, right? One government body runs everything. That's not good for everybody. But there are some things that may be beneficial. There's a reason that we went to 811 nationally, right? There were some standards there that just seemed to make sense. There's probably some balance in there. And what I also heard James ask about and say is the communication in this community when it comes to damage prevention is awesome. And we've got lower damages because of it, right? When the multiple parties communicate well, and we can have a level-headed conversation sitting around a table about what our goals and objectives are, what our challenges are, how my actions may impact you, how your actions may impact me, and we can meet in the middle, and we communicate well, damages go down.
That's right.
100%. I can tell you though, it's not without fireworks. Okay. So like we'll get like 60 people and they'll chime in. They'll be online, and we get that room. It's hot. It's packed. And people speak their mind. I mean, we've had some hot issues lately where we've had to create our own little subcommittees and coalitions and all these different things because not everybody sees eye to eye, right? Sure. But I can tell you this, we do all have one thing in common. We're looking for the best thing for our community, and we're looking out for our industry as a whole, right? So I'll give you an example. One thing we did was we noticed some the big fiber companies were rolling in, right? And we knew that there was going to be a big stress on the system. So what did our committee do, and what did our coalition do? We made sure that we paid attention, and we brought them in, and we helped educate them to the local way of doing business here.
That's right.
And they got connected, and they got acclimated, and then they got trained. And guess what? The system was not stressed far beyond what it could handle, right? So now we have another one coming in. And so we're trying to repeat that same process. Now, I know that other states are dealing with the exact same thing probably right now because, the fiber, it's just going everywhere right now, sure. But, it's one of the things we did here locally that I believe that we drove down damages here, and we came together, and James brought up a culture. So I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that's really important in driving down damages as well as for our industry, but public perception, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, all of this is focused on protecting the community that we live in.
Yeah,
That's right.
our workers, the people's houses that we're working on, the roadways that we're working in, you know, to make sure that at the end of the day, we're all going home safe. So anything that, you know, I may not agree 100% with what Tyler does, he may not agree with what I do, but at the end of the day, the end goal is to make the system better. And we're seeing that happen. And it's based on 100% is the communication between all of the parties involved.
Yeah.
Communication is key.
That's right.
You know, building those relationships. We're competitors. You know, we work in the same field. But at the end of the day, if I do something and it benefits him, am I benefiting myself as well? Yes, I am. You know,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, we're all building a better machine.
Yep.
You know, I had mentioned.
Sorry, on that positive note, we're past our time limit. Can I get a hand for these fine panelists here? Special thanks for those who are joining us on the live stream. I know it's almost 8 p.m. on the East Coast. We're back here tomorrow morning at 8:15 a.m. Pacific time for another roundtable. See you all tomorrow. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Oh, nice to meet you.